In fact, let's go inside that matchup between BYU and Texas with one of our national friends, Trevor Matich, ESPN College Football Insider. It's another Matich Monday. Trevor, BYU and Texas, the way that BYU won got a lot of people's attention. What does it really do for the Cougars and their football program moving forward from a national standpoint?
Well, he gets eyeballs on Thursday night against Houston. That's the biggest thing. There were a lot of national prognosticators, including Kirk Herbstreit, who picked Texas to win that game. And the fact that BYU didn't just beat them, but they pasted them, I think make people turn around and say, whoa, is this BYU team for real? So now with a little bit of national whiplash in Provo's direction, I think BYU will have a chance to prove that they really are a team that's worthy of a New Year's Bowl.
Did BYU benefit or get hurt at all by maybe the Big Ten struggling, I guess? Taysom Hill's hurdle I thought would be on the top 10 of SportsCenter. You'd think it'd be shown later, but did BYU hurt in any way by the Big Ten struggling?
I think if it were for the Thursday night game, you could make that case because attention spans are so short. But because of Thursday night, that hurdle by Taysom, and by the way, one of his touchdowns in the third quarter where he looked like a fullback slamming into a defender with his shoulder bouncing off and powering in for the last yard for a touchdown. Plays like that will be featured pregame.
Yeah.
So the nation will have a chance to see that, not as a package of 10 other plays, but as its own thing for its own reason on Thursday night with the spotlight on.
Trevor Matich, ESPN College Football Insider, joining us. It's Matich Monday, 1984 national champion. Okay, Trevor, there were so many things that went right for BYU. Taysom Hill's play obviously has been well documented. The defense, after 2 games, only giving up 8.5 points per game against UConn and Texas. But for you, what was the most impressive thing that happened for BYU against Texas?
I loved how BYU took advantage of big plays. And you could see it in that burst in the third quarter where they scored 4 consecutive touchdowns. There were 2 big plays on the first 2. One was that play where Taysom scrambled out of the pocket, leapt over the defender, and then scored. The next touchdown was a big play where Taysom hit as he threw the ball deep down the field to Jordan Leslie, and Leslie made that circus catch. They scored a touchdown on the strength of that big play. And then the next 2 touchdowns, both of them, came off of big plays by special teams that set them up on short fields. So the fact that BYU was making these big plays and then converting them, punching them in, is what impresses me.
When all is said and done, is the Taysom Hill hurdle going to be one of the more iconic plays in BYU football history?
I don't know if it will be iconic. It'll be one of the prettiest. You know, it depends. Iconic, I think, requires that it be something with meaning in terms of championship level or individual award, Heisman level, that kind of a thing.
So, like if BYU goes 12-1 or something this year, we'll look back at the hurdle like we do Kyle Morrell in '84, kind of deal.
Yes, that's right. Or if Taysom is in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, then we'll look back on this hurdle the same way. It's the kind of thing that if you match an amazing play like that with moving the ball forward from a standpoint of other things off the field, then yes, that's the kind of thing that we will look back on with in the light of Kyle Morrell's play, et cetera. If not, then it'll just be another really awesome play, but it won't rise to that level of importance. So the team needs to make this individual play important.
BYU gets ranked 25th in the AP poll. It's only the second week in 52 weeks worth of polls since BYU went independent that the Cougars have been in the top 25. What does this mean for BYU?
Well, it means a lot of frustration in some ways because you could see what this could do for BYU. If BYU continues to be the highest ranked of the group of 5, in other words, the non-autonomous 5, then they would have been a lock to get an automatic berth into a New Year's Eve or New Year's Day bowl, the contract bowls and the
playoffs.
Anyway, the New Year's Eve and New Year's Day bowls.
Yeah.
The
New Year's 6.
Right, those bowls. Sorry about that for spacing the name, but the point is this: that they are right now the highest ranked, and if they were considered as Group of 5, they would be in one of those bowls guaranteed because they get that automatic berth. But since BYU is not considered in the group of 5, then they are eligible for an at-large selection, but they don't get the automatic berth. So every week that BYU is ranked and ranked higher than all other teams in the group of 5, I think will be a source of frustration for BYU fans. But keep in mind that BYU is a national brand, and if they're able to get up into the top 10, they still have a chance to play in one of those bowls as an at-large selection.
Trevor Matich, ESPN College Football Insider on BYU Sports Nation. BYU's offensive line in that third quarter looked really, really dominant. You were a part of one of the best, if not the best, offensive line ever in Cougar football history back in '84. Are you encouraged by what you saw in the third quarter specifically?
Very encouraged, because they made a lot of yards inside. And that's important, because teams, as Texas did in that third quarter, will try to get a lot of weight, a lot of personnel, penetration on the edges to keep Taysom from breaking out into the open on the edge. And so BYU's offensive line has to take advantage of that by getting movement inside, and they did. They were able to get good yards, good chunks of yards inside on running plays that required them just to beat the other guy, not trick him or not hope he missed a tackle. So I was very encouraged with the way BYU did that, especially since the Texas defensive line is big and strong and hostile. And coached by Charlie Strong, they know what to do. And at times they push BYU's offensive line around. But BYU's offensive line never stopped fighting. And it was the fight that they showed in the success of running inside in that third quarter that impressed me most.
We talked a lot about kind of the moment at the top of the show. What was the moment for you in BYU versus Texas on Saturday?
Well, the moment, I think, would have been that leap by Taysom, because it was a tight game early. And the first half, I mean, BYU couldn't move the ball, Texas couldn't move the ball. It just felt like that game a few years ago where BYU couldn't punch it in and Texas hung around and finally they won it late. It just felt like it was materializing. And when Taysom broke out on a broken play, a scramble, and then not only went the distance but did it in such spectacular fashion, it took some of the air out of Texas, but more importantly, it made BYU believe. It's like, okay, good. Now we can do this. And then with that long play to Leslie on the next drive that set up the next touchdown, all of a sudden BYU was validated. And this is the important thing. This is still a young program in this new offense, this go fast, go hard offense. And the validation that they got with those two plays really lifted them. And that belief, I think, carried them for the rest of the half.
ESPN's Trevor Matich with us on BYU Sports Nation. It seems like every Cinderella season for a team like Boise State, or even go back to your team in 1984 that won the national championship, there is a big-time early season victory. For you guys, it was Pittsburgh, who was then ranked number 3 at the time. Does this win now give the BYU team in 2014 that thought of, hey, you know, why couldn't we win every game? What's the mentality that they take from this?
Well, I think the mentality is we can play physically with anybody, because even with the suspensions, Texas was a very, very physical team, especially on defense. UConn, you know, it was nice to have that win, but UConn is not very good. And so I think that's what they take away from it. When we get into an alley fight, just a dirty, mean slugfest with somebody that's got big, strong athletes, we can hang in with them and we can beat them. And that's an important thing to know, because you can think about that in the office all you want in the meeting room. But until you do it, you know, you don't know. It's like my freshman year, we went off to play Texas A&M, and they were ranked high. They had All-American candidates all over the field, you know. And as a freshman, I didn't know how in the world we'd be able to handle All-American candidates in Texas A&M. Wow. Yeah. But then we did, and we beat them. And all of a sudden, in my mind, there was a belief there that wasn't there before. So, you know, momentum feeds on itself. Belief and enthusiasm feeds on itself.
ESPN has a football power index that gives rates every team in FBS and their chance to actually win out. BYU's number 1 in that right now. 20.9% chance to win out, followed by Oklahoma, Florida State, Oregon, Baylor. That's a good list. BYU's schedule sets up nicely. We've talked in the offseason a lot about, hey, there are some tough games. There aren't going to be a ton of maybe ranked teams, and there's 3 P5s. 2 of those aren't that good. But BYU's got a chance to do something special here. Trevor, what are BYU's chances that they actually do run the table to you?
I think if they stay healthy, they've got a very good chance. This Houston game was one that I circled in my own mind as a huge hurdle. because Houston, even though they lost to Texas San Antonio in their opener, this is an experienced, dangerous, fast team, and they know they have a chance for redemption on Thursday night as well. But if BYU can get through that, I expect them to go undefeated. The question will be, do they have the brand names on the schedule for the selection committee to move them up into a position in the top 4? Because just going undefeated doesn't mean you automatically will be in the top 4. Strength of schedule will come into it. So just like we had in 1984, if this team does, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but if this team does run the table, they will still need, like we did, other teams ahead of them to lose. Now, that's not out of the question, because when you look at the Pac-12, for example, they've got a lot of good teams there that should knock each other off. The Big Ten stock has diminished greatly. The ACC probably will not have 2 teams in it. And so the possibility exists, but we would need cannibalization in the other conferences in order for BYU to have a chance to get that high.
And that's out of BYU's control. The one thing that BYU can control and that they need to do, I think, and Bronco Mendenhall's not a fan of this, is keep the pedal down. When you win 41-7 against Texas, that's different than winning by 2 touchdowns. The
Right.
We thumped them factor. BYU can control that. I'm not saying they need to put up 70 like Baylor every week, but if BYU can put up 40-plus in each game, now we're talking, right?
Yeah, it would be nice to do things that might be considered unchristian from the standpoint of putting them. And you don't have to keep your start. You don't have to keep your starters in order to do that. I mean, the backups need to know how to throw too.
Well, yeah,
the
pass the
backups
ball.
need to know how to do. What's that?
Yeah, pass the ball when you're still up big. That would be okay.
Well, here's the thing, though. What if something happens to Taysom? What if something
Right.
happens to the other receivers or the offensive linemen? Those guys need to have experience in go fast, go hard, not just experience in getting into the game, going on a slow pace to eat the clock. So there is a moral argument to run up the score by continuing to throw it, continuing to go and run a lot of plays late in game where you're ahead, because your backups need that experience, because guess what? They're one play away from being starters. So don't think Bronco's doing anything bad or immoral if the score looks like it's being run up. That's not the case.
Trevor Matich with us on BYU Sports Nation, ESPN College Football Insider. I know you've heard this question a million times, Trevor, and it's getting old, but the whole Big 12 conversation. What does a win like BYU beating Texas 41-7 on a Saturday night primetime game really do for their chances of, hey, include us in a Power 5 conference?
I think it's money more than one win. If a Power 5 conference has a different view of BYU because of that, they don't deserve to be a Power 5 conference. They need to be taking the long view. And there are long-term reasons why BYU would be a good addition to the Big 12, in my opinion. The thing for BYU fans to watch for is if the Big 12 champion comes down to a tiebreaker of opinion with the selection committee with some other conference champion to get that fourth and final spot in the college football playoff. And if, because they do not have a conference championship game, the Big 12 champion is left out, that's the best chance for the Big 12 to change their mind. Right now, I don't think there's any plan in the Big 12 to expand.
All right, Trevor, always great to hear from you. Matich Monday delivering once again. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, guys.